Thank
A
you.
lot of us, our hearts, Charlie, in the last few days, has been very serious. Oh, our hearts have been working overtime. A lot of stress in the system. And as I mentioned, Friday is World Heart Day. And if I'm not mistaken, heart diseases continue to be the number one global killer. Is that correct?
Yes, I think from the 2000s going, non-communicable diseases are beginning to take a pole position with regards to deaths globally. I mean, we are moving or transitioning from a point where the predominant focus was infectious diseases. But now, when you look at urbanization, westernization, sedentary lifestyles, there's been a gradual increase in cardiovascular diseases and cardiovascular related deaths. And now the emphasis should be on focusing on keeping people healthy in terms of cardiovascular health and promoting healthy lifestyle decision making, because that contributes to your improved general sense of well-being and survival benefits.
And Doc, you're a physician specialist and a cardiologist.
I'm a cardiology trainee. I'm not yet a cardiologist.
Okay, a cardiology trainee.
Yes.
What is, for those of us who are uninitiated, what is the work of a cardiologist?
So a cardiologist is someone who, so I think first I would say, let me explain internal medicine, because
Sure.
a lot of people tend to ask what it is. So it's essentially like an adult form of pediatrics, essentially. So most medical conditions that don't require surgical intervention, hypertension, diabetes, stroke, etc. Now, cardiology focuses on predominantly the heart, the blood vessels, and what we call the end organ. So it's like a network. The heart is the main center, connected to the vessels that supply blood to the end organs. For example, the brain, the kidneys, etc. So once there's any pathology involving any of the, the cardiovascular tree, as I'll mention, then that is it's a broad term we describe as cardiovascular disease. But I mean, there are a lot of more specifics when you look underneath the umbrella. So any disease affecting the heart, the blood vessels, or the end organs. So a cardiologist is somebody who tends to oversee predominantly diseases that affect your heart, blood vessels, and the end organs.
Okay. And so, as we mentioned as well, it's killing a lot of people, and that's the same for what's happening in Ghana.
Yes, Ghana is no exception.
Right.
And because majority of us are being influenced by Westernized lifestyles now. I mean, we tend to consume Western foods, tend to engage in Western behaviors, eating a lot more processed foods. We are driving more in cars. We are doing less physical work compared to our predecessors, our parents and grandparents. So we are getting, and we tend to be a lot more stressed with regards to the lifestyles we live, the ambitions, juggling school and work. So we are getting sicker at a much younger age, and we are dying at a much younger age.
So what happens then to the hearts when we are doing all of these things? As you mentioned, the food, a lot of deep fried fast foods, like we say, we're not really working out, we're, especially even among the younger generation, in fact, they're getting more and more obese as the years go on. What then happens internally as you start to adopt these unhealthy practices? What happens to the heart?
Okay, so I always equate the human body to a car. So if you buy a car brand new, it functions very efficiently. So when you're young, the presumption, I mean, there are a few exceptions, is like your body is in the ideal state. But as you grow older, naturally, there's wear and tear.
Okay.
Yes. So if you have a car that is not well managed, it tends to get worn out and break down much quicker, even if it's not very old. But if you have a car that is well managed over time and well serviced, even if it's a 10, 15, 20-year-old car, it won't perform as a brand new car, but when you look at it relative to a car that's not well managed, you do better. So when gradually, as you grow old already, aging process increases your risk factors. So your risk of getting hypertension, diabetes, and what we call dyslipidemia or high cholesterol levels. So that's one side of it. Then when you look at engaging in non-healthy lifestyles, smoking, drinking a lot of alcohol, sedentary lifestyle, excessive salt intake, excess intake of processed foods, carbonated drinks. So you tend to develop the risk factors for cardiovascular disease. It increases your risk of developing hypertension, diabetes, and dyslipidemia. And then you develop what we call atherosclerosis. So
atherosclerosis.
Atherosclerosis.
Atherosclerosis. Okay, what is that?
It just means that the inner lining of the vessels, predominantly the arteries, get stiffer. There's internal damage to the inner linings. So you get injury, and there's what we call endothelial remodeling. So it just
endothelial remodeling. Doc, do you have an exam coming up?
No. We use a lot of medical terminology, but I'm trying to simplify. So endothelium is just the inner lining of your vessel.
Sure.
So they adapt to whatever stressful changes that are going on within the vessel wall. Now there's injury, and then there's what we call plaque formation. Plaque just basically means a deposition of fats, cholesterol, platelets. So over time it occludes or narrows the blood vessels down. And once it narrows the blood vessels down, then it increases your risk of either getting a stroke, because the plaque itself can break off.
Wow.
And then go and dislodge in a much smaller vessel further down the line.
And then the pressure.
Exactly. So now you may cut off blood supply to the brain, you get a stroke. If it's to the heart, you can get a heart attack. Long-standing pressures can also lead to heart failure. You can have kidney problems. Even you can have what we call peripheral vascular disease. So the vessels themselves get damaged. You can go blind. So when you look at it in total, there's a huge spectrum of events that could happen. So it all depends on the risks, factors you face, and then how much you can minimize the risk, and then take care of conditions that can predispose you to such cardiovascular disease down the line.
Thanks for that, Doc. I think especially with the exercise and the food, a lot of us now are sensitized to know that, if we don't pay attention to that area, we could put ourselves in a lot of danger. But let's talk about the element of stress. Do you think that a lot of Ghanaians are well aware of what type of impact prolonged stress can have on the body, especially the heart? Because you'll have some individuals who might be, physically fit, they don't really dabble too much in the fast food, but as far as stress and pressure is concerned, they are in a high, consistent state of stress. Break it down for us. What does that then do to the heart? Because this is not somebody who has maybe plaque built up from the foods, but the stress, the pressure from everyday life, especially the youth.
Okay, yeah. So basically, stress is a factor that's been downplayed over a period of time, but plays a major role in improving your risk of developing conditions that can predispose you to cardiovascular injury. So prolonged stress over a period of time, one, increases your risk of developing hypertension.
Hypertension.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's one. And then hypertension inadvertently leads to diabetes and vice versa. So there's an interplay between hypertension and diabetes. And diabetes, most diabetics develop high cholesterol over a period of time. So they work synergistically in a negative way to cause destruction. So long-term stress is one. And majority of the time, you see that increased stress levels is indirectly proportional to your rest and exercise, because once you're always stressed, you don't have the energy to go to the gym. And rest also plays a role in the healing process. So when you're constantly stressed, besides increasing your risk factors, that's what we call oxidants. So there's a lot of inflammatory factors that over a period of time that are released and associated with stress.
We also hear about cortisol.
Yeah, cortisol levels. So they are all extended over a period of time, and it puts you in a state where it predisposes you to developing hypertension or diabetes over a period of time. So most people who are very stressed don't have the time to take care of themselves, eat and diet properly, exercise and rest properly. And those are contributing factors towards good cardiovascular health.
Now, we've talked about the risk factors, what we're not doing so right, what is contributing to, heart diseases remaining the number one killer in the globe and a high killer here in Ghana. What about what we can do to mitigate and minimize? I know you'll talk about the food and the exercise. What else can we do?
Okay, so food, exercise, healthy lifestyle, cut down on alcohol, smoking.
On alcohol?
Yes, so now it's advisable that if you can stop, completely stop. But if not, men shouldn't take
Doc,
more
you've
than...
made somebody tune off from sunrise.
No.
You've made somebody change the dial.
We are not saying you shouldn't drink, but drink in moderation. So usually we say men shouldn't take more than 14 units a week, and women 8 units. So what is 1 unit? 1 unit is a shot of whiskey or gin, or a glass of wine, or a small bottle of beer.
Okay.
So you shouldn't take more than 14 in a week if you're a man. You're a woman, you shouldn't take more than
How
8.
many bottles of beer is that?
A small bottle of
Is
beer
1 unit.
is 1 unit.
So in a week, you shouldn't consume more than 14.
if you're a man, and 8.
At
if
the
you're a
weekend,
woman.
somebody will do 7
Exactly.
on Friday, then they'll do the other 7 on Saturday.
Exactly. So binge drinking and chronic alcohol use can also worsen your cardiovascular health. And
Right.
a lot of time drinking tends to go with smoking. That's another
And
risk
pork.
factor.
And pork, the drinking, it goes with hand in hand.
Excessive meat intake can be a problem.
The red meat.
Especially meat that contains a lot of fat, because they are actually they're called steaks, so they are the cleaner side of the meat. But fish is preferred anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, but when you take meat that has a lot of fat or excessive intake of red meat, it can also contribute. But you also have to screen yourself. Constantly you should be proactive and do health screenings for yourself. You don't need to wait till you are sick before you go to the hospital. So we always advise you to at least yearly check your blood pressures, check your sugars, check your cholesterol levels, and do routine investigations, because majority of the time when you have these conditions, you may not have any symptoms. That's
Really?
the warning, yes.
And so nothing will indicate that there's something wrong internally?
Yes, majority of the time. So I say sometimes those who are lucky may have symptoms. So hypertension, you may have constant headaches, blurred vision.
Okay.
So that one will most likely take you to the hospital. Diabetes, you might lose a lot of weight, you might drink a lot of water, you might be urinating frequently in large volumes, you might be eating a lot but losing weight. Yes, so we call it the 3 Ps: polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. So it just means eating too much, drinking too much, and peeing too much.
Okay.
So that may take you to the hospital and it's discovered. But majority of the times, people have no symptoms. And the first sign of a symptom might be a complication. So
Goodness.
you may get a stroke, and that is the first time you discover you're hypertensive.
And that is a reality. Somebody's first time knowing that they have a heart condition is when they are rushed to the hospital with a stroke.
Yeah, so he's probably had hypertension for the past 15 years but doesn't check.
Wow.
And he gets to the hospital, he's had a heart attack. You now investigate, he had high BPs, he kind of just brushed off and didn't pay attention. So we are trying to encourage people to be more proactive. Don't wait till you have. Go actively looking, in addition to engaging in the healthy lifestyle we're talking about.
Very important. Well, time check, it is 26 minutes past the hour of 9. We're still live here on 3FM Sunrise on 3FM 92.7. We're talking about our hearts this morning, how to keep them healthy. Doc is in the studio. He says we have to be proactive, not reactive, because some of these conditions can stay with you silently, and the only time that you know there's a problem is when you have an emergency. And in some cases, it could be too late. The effects are not reversible. So this is very good advice for the morning. Every time we say we need to cut down on certain foods, some of you tune off. We want you alive and well for next year. We have a big job to do next year. We need all of you here, all hands on deck. But Doc, before we wrap up, what are some of the foods then that you would recommend? I know you talked about minimizing the fatty red meats, opting for fish. What other foods should we introduce into our diet to help suppress some of these things?
So basically, the advice is what we call the DASH, dietary approach to stop hypertension. It's a DASH diet. It's like a Mediterranean diet. So we tend to advise you to take foods that are rich in proteins, vegetables, potassium, and low in salt. So as much as possible, 1, the food should be natural. 2, take more protein and vegetable-based foods. try to ration your carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, in as much as they are important, but if you take them excessively, they are converted to fat.
So the banku limit, it's not too many balls.
So banku is not bad, but too much banku is bad.
Too much banku
as
is
much
bad.
as possible, cut out fat completely. So fat is usually detrimental in the long term. Then a lot of the highly salted foods, highly processed foods, then taking lots of alcohol, smoking, those are things that constitute. And in our side of the world, we take a lot of salt. And it's been documented that blacks tend to have a higher sensitivity to salt intake. So it causes a lot of salt and water retention and can increase your risk of developing hypertension.
Well, Doc has said it all. This is how you and I keep our hearts healthy. Doc, final words ahead of World Heart Day on Friday before we bid you farewell.
Okay, I will advise everybody to be proactive, engage in healthy lifestyle behavior, and as much as possible invest in your health, because if you lose your health, you lose everything.
Government should also stop stressing us so that our hearts can, because Doc, you see the pressure in town.
I mean,
you are seeing an increase in the heart problems because of the pressure in town.
And people don't have time for themselves. So, but I always say, if you die today, the company employs someone else.
That's true. So take time off, rest when it's needed.
Yes.
Thank you, Doc. We're very grateful for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Dr. Mbaye Kube is a physician specialist. He's a cardiologist in training. He says, let's limit some of the things that are not making our hearts so healthy. I think it's great advice for the morning. We're very grateful.
Spiritual, I'm walking